So in the previous video I did, we painted the base color of some of these Bachmann On30 side dump cars. And I showed how using different base colors and some acrylic washes would bring a wood tone to them. The next step we have to do is paint the metal parts. These two cars here I previously painted, and the car on the left has the metal parts painted with a base color of a flat dark brown. And then there's some burnt umber washes applied on top of that. The frame was painted black with some spackling of some rust acrylic paints from Vallejo. And I think it's another brand, Reaper Colors. And then the car on the right, the base color of the metal was a light gray, much like the color I painted the body on the gray car. And the frame was painted just a flat black. And then I used some of the AK and MIG enamel washes. So I think what we'll do is just show both of those techniques on the two cars from the previous video. So these are the cars I'm starting with, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take a small brush and paint the metal parts. There was enough washes on this car where it almost looks as though the metal parts started to paint themselves, but I don't want them like that. I'm going to go ahead and repaint them and paint all the metal parts on here. So we're going to get started with that. And with that, I'll get this going here. I think we're going to do this one in the, I think we'll do this one in the flat brown, and we'll go back to the gray on this one and see how it goes. Actually, I think I might change my mind. I think I might do the gray on this car since it's brown tones, and I'll do the brown on this one since it's gray tones. So to start on the gray car here, I'm going to use this flat brown. This color is FX10, and of course a small brush, and no magic here. I'm just going to go ahead and paint all these metal parts, trying to keep it on the parts the best I can. So that's kind of the base color, and that's actually a pretty good, just a generic rust color. I know some people might paint rust a little more orange, but I find that as rusted parts sit out, they don't really have that bright orange. That bright orange is kind of more of a real fresh rust color. Now, in real life, there's a lot of variations. You could take it any way you want and pretty much be right on. You can even use blues and blacks and purples. But I think the best thing to do is maybe find a picture or go out and find a piece of metal you like, and then try to copy it, and don't worry about if it looks like everybody else's rust. So I'm going to go through and just paint all the metal parts on here with this color, and then we'll move on to the brown car. Back again with these same two On30 cars, these Bachmann side dump cars. And you can see the car on the left is significantly different looking than when we last left it. I was happy with the color that it was at, but it wasn't the color I intended to make it when I first started painting it. I was looking for that silvery wood color, and even though that color ended up being a nice color, it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So I tried one more thing here, and I decided why not just start with it being silver. So I took this Vallejo oily steel, only because that's the only color I really had on hand that was a silver metallic color. And I took some of this Vallejo white, and I mixed it down into a little bit of a lighter gray color, or I'm sorry, a lighter steel color. You can kind of see a little remnants of it along the bottom here. And I brush painted the whole car again, and then when that was dry, I did another wash, 2 light washes over it of mostly just black, with very, very little burnt umber, if any, in it. And then I used some of the yellow ochre in some of these areas. And I did a little videotape of me applying that. It doesn't have any sound, but I'll attach it on here, kind of some real quick highlights of it to show how it looked when it went on. But I'm actually, this is the color I think I am going to stick with. It's more in the line of what I wanted to do. car on the right here, the one that started out with the flesh base and the burnt umber and black washes, I've gone ahead and just painted a gray color on all these metal parts all around the car. And I didn't really get too careful with being real particular, other than I didn't get any of it down on the wood parts. But a lot of it, you can see that this is a little bit different color than this because I was mixing the colors. That won't matter with the washes on. The point was just to get a kind of a gray metal base. This car, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the flat brown color here on the metal parts, and then we'll see what that ends up looking like. Well, another day here. I'm doing washes. You can see that on the gray car now I've painted all the metal parts the flat brown, and you know that's actually a pretty good look to that car. You can leave it just that way and it looked just fine. I think that's a really good look for just that kind of bleached wood color with some rusty metal. But I think we can do a little more to that, but we're going to set that aside and we're going to focus on this car that we did the gray metal on it. For that I'm going to do some more washes, but this time I'm going to use a different product that a lot of moderators maybe never heard of, and that's using these Enamel Washes. Got two different brands here. I've got some from AK Interactive and I've got some from MIG. And as you can see kind of by the names on here, they're military washes, or I guess washes used in a lot of military modeling. But they work really good for model railroading just as well. So you can just ignore the names and look at the colors. And I'm going to use pretty much these three colors. I don't know about this earth, if I'm going to use it on this car. I have used it and it looks pretty good. It's more like a splattered mud kind of dirt color. And I may put some on this car, but primarily on the metal parts, I'm going to use these two here. And the first wash I'm going to use is this dark. It represents kind of a dark rust color, even though it kind of looks black to the bottle, or a real dark brown. That'll be our base rush. Ugh, that's hard to say. Base rust color. And then once that dries, we're going to put a wash of light rust. And that'll represent kind of, you know, maybe rain making new rust around the rivets and things. The difference between these and using an acrylic wash is these do not dry fast. An acrylic wash, you could put it on and maybe in an hour later you could probably wash it again without any risk of the previous wash lifting. But for these, you have to let them dry maybe even days, depending on how thick they're put on in the environment. So this is a little slower process. Again, with washes, it's best just to have other projects going on and doing a wash and setting it aside and moving on and doing something else. Again, it only takes, you know, mere seconds or minutes to put these washes on. For these washes, I'm going to use a really fine pointed brush. And sometimes what I like to do with the washes from these enamel washes is I have some of this odorless thinner, and I'm going to thin them out a little bit. Sometimes they might be a little thick and a little aggressive, especially if you haven't used them. But I'll play around with that. So we'll open up this one here and take a look at it. You have to shake these up a little bit. You can see this one looks fairly thick. And I'm going to come in here, just grab a little bit of it here. Actually, I'll just take it off the cap. You have to be careful taking it off the cap though, because it could be a little thick there. You can kind of see that this one's pretty thick. So I am going to probably use some thinner on this one. And just pouring a little bit into the cap here. And then I'll try to find my well-used now piece of plastic here. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of this, get the brush wet, and again you can see we're kind of going for that thin, that kind of look again. What I like about these versus the acrylic is these will flow. in and settle around on things. The acrylics don't seem to like to flow out as much as these oil washes do, or these enamel washes. But but I do prefer the enamel washes for big stuff because it is a lot to put on, and it does get it done fairly fast and without any nasty chemicals or smell. You know, this says it's odorless, but there's still a smell. So you can see how these just go on. You don't have to be too careful with these. If it bleeds out onto the metal, it's not, or I mean onto the wood parts, it's not that bad. But that's kind of how that'll look. And it goes pretty fast. This stuff flows right around. You can see I'm not being all that careful. That's probably a good color. And that's probably a good consistency right there. Now I'm going to go through and I'm just going to wash everything with this on this car, and then we'll come back and see what happens. I probably won't videotape again until it's dry and we're ready to put on the light rust. This is another one of those things where you can build up layers if you want. You know, I could have started with another color. Kind of the reason why I picked the gray is it doesn't darken the wash, and you can tell it's supposed to be rust. If we started out with a black, it would eventually get there, but it would be a very, very dark color. You could do a metal color, maybe even that oily steel that I used on the gray car might have been a good base color. But the gray, since it's none of the base color shows through, the gray represents just a light primer, as you would call it. So I'm gonna go through here and get all that on there. This, you just be careful not to touch it because it's gonna be wet for a while. So you'll want to handle this car not like I was the acrylics where I was just whipping it around. You're gonna want to not touch this stuff. So I'll continue on and we'll see what it looks like later. Okay, I'm just gonna show a little bit here. I just went over this whole car with the wash here, the MIG wash, and I guess I should say the name. This wash here is called Track Wash, and I guess they use it on tanks. But you can see how it looks on here, and it looks a little rough sometimes, and it could be pretty, you know, weird looking now. But as it dries, it's gonna kind of have these blended areas here and these dark areas and some light areas, and that's really gonna work for us. What I really like about this stuff is you can get in here and see how you can soften that because it's still wet for a really long time. So if it's a little too blotchy, you can smooth it out. So the cars have been sitting here drying. It's been about 2 days. You can see the car here with the enamel washes, how it kind of dried out with these, you know, nice random patterns. And on this one, it's just a straight painted flat brown. You can kind of see on this one here, this is the first side where it was really thinned out. Probably too thin, unless that's the look you're going for. I'm probably going to go more for this here. And if you look on the ends, and then the other side of the car. There's some nice things going on though. I mean, these are some interesting things happening here. So I think I'm going to give it another coat of the track wash. And this time I'm not going to thin it out. I'm just going to brush it on. We'll see what that looks like. On the flat brown car, I think I'm going to do this one here also with the wash of the track wash, because that'll give it some shadow around some of this stuff. And then when both of those are dry, I'm going to go over it with this light rust wash. So here I've got just on this little brush here, straight out of the bottle, the track wash. And as I apply it on the car, you can see just how thick it is. But it was good that I did it thin to see how it would react. But I think this is going to be a really good look for this car, just straight out of the bottle. So I'll go through the entire car and recoat every surface. and then we'll see what it ends up looking like. So I've let this second wash of the Make Track Wash dry, and you can see how this car that had the lighter gray painted wash ended up looking, and that looks pretty good. You could leave that there again, that'd be pretty nice. I really like the bottom here, how it looks. Here's the car with the flat brown and one coat of the track wash, and you can see that it just doesn't show up nearly as much. It still shows up, you can still see it. But what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to add this light wash or light rust wash, and you can see how that works out. I've painted the frames of these cars just minutes ago. This Vallejo Air, just straight black. Where's the color? Oh, right there at the top. What's really nice about this stuff is you don't mix anything, just spray it right out of the bottle. So that I'll give that a little bit to dry, and I'll just add a rust wash over that too. So, you know, again, no magic to this light rust wash. We're just going to throw a little bit on there, and I'm going to go, again, we'll go straight from the bottle this time and see how it looks on the first pass. You know, if you want it lighter, you can obviously thin it down with that. But if I remember right, this stuff's pretty thin, yeah. So we'll cover that on some of these, and this will settle in around on some of these rivets. And then I'll go do the rest of the car off camera. Oops, sorry for bumping the camera again. I'm going to get a better camera mount for the future videos. So the light rust on this probably will show up a little bit more. So again, it's pretty subtle stuff, but when it dries, I think you're going to be happier with the way this flat brown rust turned out. And then on the frame here, probably just get a bigger brush, and maybe that brush that we started with here. And on this one, I'm just going to use the light rust because it's just kind of a dark car, and I'm just going to flood the whole entire frame. Now, I literally painted this thing minutes ago, and you can still see I got the overspray all over my hands. So that's just what I like about acrylics, is you don't need to let them dry very long at all. So I'll finish this thing, but that's how we're going to do it. We're just going to go over the whole thing with it and flood it with it. If you don't like the way that looks, of course you can add a little thinner on there if you really want it to spread out even more. So this is just this odorless enamel thinner, and I'll just, you know, you can go on the previously applied wash, but you can see how it'll kind of float that rust a little bit into puddles and kind of make it work around things. And that'll actually really dry, I think, really nice. Oops, sorry for bumping that camera. I'll come back in here and add some heavier on some top surfaces here. Take a little off of that. So, same with the sides, just flood it in there. If this ends up being too bright, you can always go back and add a thin wash of this to tone it down. Sometimes that orangey rust just stands out a little too much and can kind of look a little fake. But, you know, rust comes in a lot of different colors. And so on the bottom of this car, I'm going to try adding some of this earth color. And I'm not sure how I'm going to add this yet. I'll brush it on kind of with a wider brush here and see how it goes. But this, I think, would represent kind of a wheel splatter type. Maybe something like that. We'll see what that one ends up drying like. Maybe on this other one, I'll do the technique where you kind of flick the paint on there. So we'll try something like that. Okay, now we're going to look at the washes we just applied. This is the car that had the flat brown wash that I just applied the light rust wash over. And I think that's good. I'm just going to call this one done. You could see it did add a little bit of coloring in there. You can see some streaking over here. It got rid of, that flat brown's a nice color, but this just added another little layer of depth to the car, to the rust on the car. This is the one that is splattered the earth color on the bottom. It looks okay. I think it would be fine. I don't know if I'd do it again. It's pretty subtle, but it looks okay. So we're going to call that one done. This is the brown car, or the flesh base car, and this has got the track wash, 2 coats of the track wash, and then the light rust wash. And you can see how that rust has got some real nice variety along the bottom here. That's kind of why I start out with the lighter color. I think that really has a good look to it. This is that one I kind of did the earth splatter. It's got kind of a sheen to it. I don't know, I might spray some dull coat on that. I don't know if I do that again either. I just wanted to see how it would look on an area that you don't really see. So this one, other than that, I'm going to call this one, actually I have one other thing. I just got this this stuff here, and this is a buffing pigment, and we're going to try that. I think I'm going to try it on these rivets here to make them be dark, but it'll look like iron. So we'll try that before we finish out today. Here are the 2 frame pieces. They were just painted black, and literally is, minutes after I painted them black, I gave them a quick light rust wash. And you can see this one here, I just left it that way. And I may leave it this way, and I might pair that one up with this car, since it has a more of a faded out wood. Look, I don't know, we'll see. Doesn't really go with the top here. On this bottom one, I added just a layer of the track wash, or I should say just one pass of the track wash over the top of the light rust wash. And that might be actually a better, that's a better blend. I think I'll put these pieces together. I guess I could have painted this whole thing brown. I just didn't want to do that. But I think this is probably a good combination. I'll put those together, and then on this one here, that's actually probably a better looking combination there. So I'll put this one with that car. And then for the wheels, I just gave them a quick spray of brown, but I got a little, or not a brown, of just a black. I used the Vallejo Air black straight out of the bottle. And we're going to do one other thing with these. So one of the ways I like to weather the wheels on freight cars is I like to make kind of a grimy, dirty, sandy, kind of gunky stuff. One of the ways I like to weather wheels is I like to mix up some of this weathering powder with some paint. It kind of gives that look of grease and oil that's built up on the surface of something, and then there's dust building in with that, and more grease and more dust. It kind of makes that real thick. If you've ever seen something like that, it's kind of a thick, almost clay mix of dirt and oil. And so the way I do that is I take some of these weathering powders. It doesn't really matter which ones. They're kind of all the same, I think. The Bar Mills here, and I think this is the Bragdon. Yep, this is a Bragdon set here. And I'm going to take a little bit of black paint here, and I'm going to take one of these earth colors in here. And what I do is I just take some black right out of the bottle, and I just wipe it in the wheel. And I dip some of this in here, some of the powder in here, and mix it right in the wet paint. And then just kind of cake it in there. You can even put more. And what you're going to see is there's going to be like this buildup of, sorry about the camera there. Definitely going to change that in the future. But you can see this as I keep patting it in there. I don't know if you can see that very well. In person, it makes a great, see if I can get the camera to focus on it. So I'll go ahead and do that with all the wheels. So I just put a coat in there, grab some powder, probably work over the bin is best. And just make a paste in there. You can even drag it into the edges and pack it down in there. I really apologize for the bump in the camera. And then that'll dry in there real nice. So I'll do that with all the wheels, and then we'll move on to the next surprise. So this next product I'm going to try out is from VMS, Vintage Modeling Solutions. And I ordered these online from Michigan Toy Soldier in the US. And what this does is it's supposed to, this is a powder, and this is a binder, and it is enamel. And what it's supposed to do is it goes on black, and you dry brush it on. And when you let that dry, then you come back and you buff it, and it makes that iron look, kind of, that has that sheen to it. In the past, I've done things like that by rubbing a lead pencil over a surface, but that was never really all that permanent. And so I saw this again on a website for modeling tanks, or a YouTube video. And so what we're going to do, matter of fact, I believe that the video was from VMS. And so I'm just going to use a little bit of this powder. I'm not going to mix up very much of it. So just get a small amount here. And then I'm going to put just a few drops. I really like these bottles. It's got this really nice dropper on here. So I'm just going to put a few drops of this binder in there. And actually, I'm not going to brush it on with that good brush. I'm going to mix it up with a bad brush. And so you kind of make this almost paste-like, or paint, kind of a thick paint with it. And then, you know, I could actually take this, maybe I'll try a little bit of it. And now this is, what you're going to want to do with this, from what I've seen and the little bit I've tested with it, is we're going to want to dry brush. So we're just about done with this box. So I'm going to wipe that off, and I'm just going to very lightly hit some top surfaces, and it's going to look black when it goes on there, but it buffs out to a kind of a metal look to it. So just dab that on here and there, and I'm going to use a finer brush and come back and get those rivets there. We'll see how this ends up turning out. I don't have all that much experience with this, so I'm not 100% sure if it'll even show up. We'll see. Actually, I can just see by that how it's kind of drying out. It has almost an iron look to it right there. So we'll see how that goes. Excuse me. Get these stirrups where someone would obviously step. And just rub a little bit more right here. Now I'm going to get that fine brush, and I'm going to pick up a little bit more of this. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more, one more drop of binder in there. Get it wet again. I'm just going to hit some of these tips up here. Kind of go over those rivets, any edge that might maybe get worn off. So we'll see what this looks like. I'm just going to kind of go over this whole thing and add a few spots here and there. So I've been doing a little more experimenting with this spot-on pigment that I was brushing on And I went back to this old brush and picked up some more of that wet pigment, and then wiped it off so it was pretty dry. And then I just picked up one of these frames and I just started rubbing it on, you know, your typical dry brush. And I really like the effect it's getting here. It's getting a real metallic look. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera or not. I don't have very good lighting. That's another thing I'm going to work on in the future here, is getting some better lighting. But I really like the look this is getting on its edges and on these iron parts here. I could definitely see this making its way onto more models. I also went through I know the car I said it was done, but I went through here and I just rubbed it on some of these parts here. It has a much more steel-like look to it. So I really like that stuff. I think it's got a lot of uses. I could see it just definitely adds that third dimension. You know, sometimes people will do this dry brushing with white, and it just makes a really harsh contrast sometimes, and this really makes the details pop. It just gives it that extra something. And I may find I might want to go over some of those with a final rust wash. I guess we'll see how it all kind of dries out. All right, hopefully the next step is the last. By the way, that for the wheels, the paint I was mixing with the powder was just an acrylic paint. I happened to actually just have this Vallejo Air Black that I just grabbed. Doesn't matter that was thin for airbrushing because I was mixing it with this powder. Well, that's going to be it for me for these Bachmann On30 cars. I hope that maybe you've seen some new techniques you haven't tried before, maybe some products you haven't thought about, and that maybe some of these techniques will be useful to you. Thanks for watching.